Hello there, friends. This is Shannon coming at you with another weaving video for our popular little bookmark looms. We had a question from somebody who wanted to make very specific type of bracelet, and they wanted more warp length while still being able to maximize the weaving length of our loom. And so that's a pretty easy fix. We're just going to change up the way we warp the loom in order to achieve that goal. So normally what we would do as we're warping is we would warp and then just warp on the front side, right? So we would go around one of the little teeth down at the bottom of the loom and then go back up to the top of the loom and go around one of the teeth and just keep warping like that. So we only have a front side warp. But if we wanted to have a longer warp thread, then we have to use the entirety of our loom. And by that, what I mean is we are going to go from the top of our loom to the bottom, and instead of wrapping around one of our teeth, we're going to actually wrap around the entire loom and come back up in the next slot between teeth on the top. And then we're going to do the same thing down to the bottom, and we're going to keep doing that until we have the width we want. We're still going to try as much as possible to center our warp. So depending on how wide we want our bracelet to be, we're going to start at the proper place as we warp. And as we warp, we want to make sure that we're pulling our thread or our yarn, whatever we're using, we're pulling it nice and taut because we still want to have a strong base on which to weave. And so as you can see, I'm pinching the thread, I'm pinching the yarn pretty tightly between the finger and thumb of my right hand as I warp. Okay, I'm gonna hop in here from the future. I'm gonna insert this to where I want it to be, but initially I had you starting at the top and ending at the bottom, but what I want you to do, even though visually for the rest of this video, there is going to be the warp thread tied off at the bottom, and I'm going to show you how to do it at the bottom. I do want you to go all the way back up because then you'll have the same number of warp threads for whatever pattern you're going to do, because a pass around, like kind of an entire warp thread is one entire loop. So I got a little confused, as we all do, but when you are warping to have extra warp threads for each of your warps, you want to go all the way around and you want to finish at the same place you're starting at. And that's whether you have an even number or an odd number. So just, even though the video is going to show how to tie it off on the bottom, if you start at the top, end on the top. If you start on the bottom, end on the bottom. Hope that helps. Thank you so much. You can count your warp threads and see if you want an even or an odd number depending on what kind of a pattern you're doing. Right now we have an even number and that feels pretty good to me. So what I'm going to do to finish, and I'll show you my favorite little finishing technique too, is after I'm all done, I'm going to still want to keep tension. So I'm going to hold on the back of my piece, I'm going to hold my thread down nice and tight with my left hand so it's not moving and loosening or anything. And then I'm going to cut myself a decent little tail, 6 or 8 inches, and I'm going to come up in this hole right here with my thread. Pretty easy to do with fingering weight or thread that fine without using a needle. But if using the metal needle that came with your kit helps, you can totally use that. I'm going to leave a little bit of a loop, and this is from the finished warp, looping down, and then the thread is coming through the loom, right? So there's just a little bit of a loop here. And this is the same kind of a knot that I do when I'm sewing. So when I'm doing embroidery, this is how I tighten up my threads on the back of my embroidery too. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tail that came through the hole and I'm going to go through this loop once and then I'm going to go through it twice. And then I'm going to go ahead and tug that loop against my loom. And as you see, if I manipulate it like this, I'm getting it tighter and tighter and tighter because I still want to have nice tension on this. So I'm all tied up and I'm ready to start weaving. When you weave, one of the main things to keep in mind is that we are only using the front warp threads. And as you can see, if you look sideways at this, we have 2 layers of warp, right? So you are only using your front warp threads. One thing that some people might do is insert a piece of paper between the two. So they have something, some sort of a barrier between the warp threads that they're using and the warp threads that they have warped, so they have more kind of overage or waste warp threads for whatever purpose you want to have. So what do you think about that? It's pretty cool. It's a pretty nice way to extend the usages on our little loom. And it's just as easy as the regular kind of warping we're doing. So I'm going to get something set up for the next video and kind of show you how you can weave and how you can insert the paper to help make it a little bit easier. All right, hi, I'm back, and we're talking about using a longer warp to make a very specific kind of bracelet that needs more warp after the weaving is done in order to braid for a tie. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be really careful about only using our front warp threads, right? And if you've watched any of my videos or taken any classes with me, you know I love a business card spacer. Love nothing more than a business card spacer. So what I did was I just into the front warp, not the back, I wove under, over a folded in half hamburger, hot dog style business card because it's nice and stiff and I like how it gives me a nice edge on which to weave. And then I'm going to grab the thread. I usually like to cut a piece of thread that is between, I don't know, like 28 inches, 26 inches to a yard. Something manageable, but long enough that I can get a couple runs before I have to change. And then, you know, my little, if you've taken any embroidery classes from me, you know that I really like to fold over the end of my thread to push through the eye of any needle I'm using. So this is how I would get started. If you're doing hem stitch, again, this is all covered in my other videos in a little more depth, but if you are using hem stitch, you want to leave a piece of your beginning weaving thread that is at least 4 times the width of your weaving piece, so you can then perform the hem stitch later. And then this is going to be a little bit trickier than we are maybe used to because we have to avoid those back threads as we're weaving. And so as I start weaving, I'm going to do the opposite that I did with my business card spacer. And I'm just going to go nice and slow. We always go slow when we're weaving, don't we? Because weaving is a slow sport and it doesn't behoove anyone to go too fast when you're weaving. We want to be nice and slow. Slow and steady wins the race. We're going to have our nice little tail. I did not grab a comb, so I'm just going to use my fingers, which you totally can, right? We're going to practice, you know, kind of putting our loom down between our passes, because that helps us to make sure we have nice even tension, because this business card is kind of holding our warp open, I can just feed my needle right through, passing this way. I'm going to push everything down. I'm going to make sure I'm not getting my tails all confused. I'm just going to weave on the front. Right? Look at that. It's just so beautiful. I'm going to pull through. Got a nice, maybe this piece is a little too long. It might be a little bit annoying to manipulate, but I'm going to make sure as I am pushing my threads down that they're not pulling in the sides of my piece. And I'm going to try to keep this as straight as possible too. And then I'm just going to keep weaving. As you can see, I am not weaving these back threads at all. Okay, now if you find that you're getting a little confused and that you're weaving your back threads too, you can take just, this is a piece of cardboard from some bobbins I bought. So you can take a piece of paper or cardboard and insert it between your two layers. Now, if it's as wide as the loom, that's kind of helpful because what it's doing is it's protecting our back warp threads from accidentally getting woven. And it just makes it a little bit more, so you have to pay attention a little bit more to your weaving. But you're not going to accidentally dip through and grab those warp threads, are ya? So, because they're the same color, and it might get a little confusing depending on how much brain space you have for crafting, because sometimes we don't have crafting brain space. And I'm not being judgy because I rarely have full brain space anymore for anything. So that's helpful too. And if you wanted to put a little bit of washi tape to hold it, or, even doubled up tape, to kind of hold it on the back, you totally could. This will easily scooch up to cover this part when you're at that part of weaving. You might not find that you need it anymore. And so then once you're all done with your weaving and you've done your hem stitch here and here, then you can just turn this over and you can cut this in half. And then you can do whatever you want to do to create your, the rest of your bracelet. I don't have any finished ones now, because making bracelets was always kind of on my to-do list for the future. And you know how that goes. But hopefully I will have some to share. But I hope this helped. And let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.